years now. And I've been, my primary function here at BIAV is information and resources, which takes all sorts of forms. We mostly by telephone, but also we do things on email and chat and all sorts of things. I also facilitate 2 support groups, and have been doing that since, well, COVID was when we started our second group, the online group, but I also do an in-person group in Richmond. I'd like this to be interactive, but I think what I'm going to start off at least by doing, and Veronica, I'm sorry, Victoria will help. Sorry, Victoria, will be helping me with this. If as we go along you have some questions, if you'd like to put them in the chat feature, that would be great, and then we can make sure to address all of them. There is a section towards the end where it is an more interactive part. So for those, I'm asking you guys questions, and we can discuss that. So I'm going to get the presentation started and be on our way. Does anyone have any questions or at all before we start? Is everybody able to hear okay and see okay? I'm going to take that all as a thumbs up. Okay, let me see. Okay. All right. So this is the first of 3 sessions this week. The Zoom link that you use to get onto this session is the same one that you can use for tomorrow and Wednesday. Tomorrow and Wednesday. I'm sorry, tomorrow and Thursday. I don't even know what day it is. I'm going to apologize in advance if there is noise. We have our next door neighbor in our building doing some reconstruction, so I'm hoping that it'll be quiet and it won't disturb us. I'm just going to be talking about the basics and hopefully beyond that for this session. What is a brain injury support group? Our definition is it's a gathering of people who come together either firsthand experience with brain injury or secondhand, such as a family member, who come together for expression, self-expression, and encouragement and mutual support. BIAV does encourage groups to be all-inclusive, because even though the causes of the problem, of the issue, of the injury might be different, many of the challenges are similar. So the groups that we facilitate here are open to, folks with TBI and ABI, whether it's an aneurysm or a anoxic injury. Folks with concussions, multiple concussions, are welcome to join. It is, but this is an individual choice, and sometimes it might be determined if you are in a hospital system or something, what your hospital is telling you to do. So, that is certainly those are all valid reasons. A support group, like I said, is meant for the emotional connection that the members can find. It's not a recreational program or an educational program or a formal therapy session. And those things, it's okay, in my view, having a recreational program or having a educational program where maybe you have a speaker come in and talk about a particular topic in greater detail. Those are great additions and adjuncts to a group, but it should supplement and complement what the group discussions and the opportunities for self-expression that happens during the meetings. Sometimes folks feel like it might treat the group as a therapy session, but formal therapy is really much more structured, and there may be more formal confrontation, goal attainment, things like that, and set up to, if there is sort of the pain of self-discovery can get addressed. And all of that can happen to certain degrees in a support group, but it is not the primary function. So I discourage people, especially folks who are not therapists, to try and fill that role, because it's neither appropriate nor necessarily desired. A support group, for what it is is a good enough purpose. um, so what is facilitation? It guides and directs how the meeting is conducted. It helps the group to be productive for everybody. Um, and and it provides enough structure to let people's ideas get flown, but enough flexibility to read what's happening in the group. I think one thing that's important is that the facilitator, especially for someone like me, who is not a person who's experienced a brain injury personally or in my family. Um, uh, and yeah, I have years of experience, but not personal experience. So it's important that we don't set ourselves up to be the font of wisdom and knowledge to the group members. We're there to help them pull out and express themselves and share their journey. Um, Facilitators really shouldn't take sides, like, oh, Mary, you are so right on that. I'm sorry, Susan, your opinion's not quite there. Everyone's opinion, everyone's expression is what it is, and we should uh, not come off as trying to be any type of deliberator of who is right or wrong, because it's too personalized for that. Um, if a member brings an issue to the group to discuss, we all have to remember that ultimately it is their choice as far as what they do with those opinions. They can throw them all out the window, or they can take them, each in measure. But it is their choice. We do need to, it is helpful that the facilitator, make sure everyone is comfortable in participating. You act as a model of behavior for what is the norm, so by showing empathy for somebody, or tolerance for a different view than what you've stated, uh, those are important functions for a facilitator. Um, and when there are decisions to be made, and we'll get into that a little bit more, this is a group process. It's not, my show, so it's up to me. Some things certainly are up to the leader, as far as what your availability is and what your skill sets are, but it is certainly, it's not a dictatorship, I guess. Sometimes we, have to steer things back to staying on topic, because it's really easy for groups to get, get stuck on a topic. And I'm going to discuss some of those issues a little bit more as we go on. So one of the things that I find really important is starting with a set of ground rules, that everybody, just understands how this works. It's important to review those those ground rules at every meeting, whether you have the same folks or new people. Especially in a group that has folks with brain injury in it. You know, a group setting for caregivers, if it's just caregivers, you may decide, well, we don't necessarily have to review these ground rules every time. But it is, but certainly if you have folks with brain injury, it's a good idea because reminders may be necessary. Um, uh, and those ground rules might change over time, you know. Certainly, you know, if you go over, and these are what I have here up on the screen, you know, raising your hand to speak, whether you're in person or, you know, if it's electronic, person can wave their hand or they can, you know, click the raise the hand feature on the platform that you're at. You know, that folks don't take over the conversation, listening to what others have to say, even if it's a different opinion than theirs. And certainly no mocking people for their ideas, no verbal attacks. Um, uh, we'll talk about it a little bit further, but you know, for the most part, if people are bringing personal issues for discussion, everybody, you know, and if they're doing that, that to me is an invitation that they're looking for feedback, but they don't have to say, oh, I'm going to definitely take Karen's advice and do that. They can just take it in. They don't have to give us their final decision. This is just, you know, this is an opportunity to share. Um, um, and of course, confidentiality. What happens in the group stays in the group. I think that's particularly important if um, if people may be part of an organization and then they see each other outside of group as well as in the group. You know, I know, like for my in-person group, several of them over the years have been members of the local clubhouse for folks with brain injury. So, you know, I always made a point at that time, you know, especially to drive this point home, that you don't bring this up, you know, if somebody shares something in the meeting, it is not fodder for discussion, you know, a couple of days later at the clubhouse, you know, or sharing it with other people. Um, um, so you know, those are you know, just a handful of ground rules, but it's also good to just, as you introduce these, especially if there are new members in the group, is to you know, is to say, is there anything else? You know, just, you know, you're asking your regulars, is there anything else? And you're asking the new folks, is there any other concerns that you might have or want to know about the group? Um, okay. Um, and people shouldn't be forced to speak either if they don't want to. Some people tend to be more quiet, and I always think of listening as a way that people participate. But it shouldn't be, you know, so it should never be something that someone feels uncomfortable about doing. Um, Here are some additional considerations for online support groups. And what I do in my online group is Victoria very is helpful as being a second facilitator. It does help, especially if you have new folks frequently coming to the group. Because doing both attention towards the interactions that's going on and technology can be a little hard, at least for some of us who are less tech savvy. I will own that one. You know, ask members to set themselves up in a private part of their home, without a lot of activity around them. Encourage the use of a headset. And and if they can't do that or don't feel comfortable do that or they don't have them, at least to turn off other devices, turn the phone off, turn the TV off, and remind them to stay focused on the activity, that is on the screen. The group meets, once a month for an hour or so. While you're here and be present, be present. Um, uh, and state and let people know not to record the meetings. This is not their meeting to record. Now, some agencies might do that. I know they do it for training purposes, or they might do it just to make sure things run smoothly. But if the leader is going to record, please make sure to uh, let your members know that. Okay. Um, uh, there are some things that say, there are some guidelines that will say to that an online group should be, no more than 15 people or 20 people, and certainly if you're expecting interactions, above that can make it a little challenging. Um, and but that is really for each group leader to decide for themselves. I know that I have had groups on my online group that have been more than 20 people, and we worked it out. I'm not someone who wants to say, I'm sorry, you came onto this group and now you have to leave because we've reached our limit. So but it's something to keep in mind. And uh so is the use of chat something to keep in mind. Most platforms that you can have a group on uh, have chat features. But they can get out of hand in a sense if there's a lot of, it's like a side conversation in an in-person meeting. It's a distraction. So, as a leader, I generally keep the chat open. And really, I think I've only maybe had to call out once, to folks, hey, the conversation should be happening here between us, so everybody is involved, not on the chat. But the chat can be a great place for people to drop resources in. And I know in my online group that happens frequently. Somebody will know of a doctor, an article, a book, something, and put it on there. And what I do after that meeting is I go through the comments and the chat and see if there's anything that to share, and I send an email out to the members, to the participants, just the folks who are at that meeting. Not going to send it to everybody, but just the people who are at that meeting, I send that out to them. I generally try and ask folks to leave their video on, because I just feel like it's more interactive. Folks who call in on the phone may not have that possibility. But I don't, like I said, I don't require it. It's important to be mindful that not everyone might want the background of their home in view, or they are just not and not savvy enough maybe to put a background on behind that makes them look like they're on the beach or something. um, so when yeah, so starting the group, I think having introductions, even if it is the same people who come most every time, because it can help with the shift, hopefully where they become more relaxed, that they get to know people a little bit better. Um, I most of the time I think what I usually ask folks is to say where they're from on the online group. In the in-person group, it's not as everybody's from Richmond, more or less. But I, ask them to, just say when and how they were injured if they'd like to. My in-person group is pretty stable group. So sometimes we will take a shortcut with that. Um, it's doesn't have to happen right away, but it is nice that folks have the opportunity, if you're in an in-person group, that they have a little time to chat, maybe create network opportunities amongst themselves, find out that they live in the same part of town and they may want to get together for breakfast or something like that. Um, it is I have in my in-person group, I do provide name tags. Um, and memory being what it is for folks with brain injury, that is helpful. I am also awful with names. So, and I tell them that I am awful with names. So I need a name tag as much as anybody else does. And I can't claim a brain injury at all. None that I know of, at least. Um, uh, so having those introductions are helpful. Sometimes you want to be aware of any cultural differences among the participants. Some just may not feel very open to saying a whole lot about themselves. So I don't push people. If they are pretty well known to each other, there can be sort of an icebreaker question, one of those silly things like, do you like the beach or the mountains, or what's your favorite hobby, or what was your best subject in school, or things like that. And that helps loosen folks up a little bit. Looking at the top reasons that people tend to participate in a support group includes these issues, meeting others in a similar situation, sharing information, feeling less alone, get inspired, and manage stress. These responses actually came from the participant evaluation surveys that we encourage people to fill out after the meetings. One of the things that I do when I'm sending them the any resources or copy of the chat that happened during the meeting and whatever resources got dropped in there. I also then send out a reminder to participate in our survey. I don't expect people to do it every month, but maybe if something stood out to them in that meeting, they can. And for those of you who may not have the technology to do that, it's we'll talk about that a little bit further insofar as evaluating your group, because this helps us to evaluate our group too. So excuse me, I needed a sip. So talking about the principles of evaluation, of facilitation, we're trying to draw out opinions and ideas. It's important, to focus on how the group is communicating and what they're communicating, and trying to, as I said earlier, not taking sides, and keeping the meeting positive. It is sometimes, important to clarify things. If somebody said something and you feel like, oh, that could be interpreted more than one way, reflecting that back to the individual. So you help them to clarify, what did they mean? What did they mean by that? You're going to model the behaviors that you want your members to share. So, a friendly and open attitude, being, showing empathy, just, all of that, the encouragement and accepting feedback. Um, it is important to remember that anybody's experience at any time, not just in a group, but in a group, can be influenced by previous groups that they've been in, or, certainly if it's a person with a brain injury, how their injury is affecting them that day. One day a person might have a real hard time focusing their attention. Maybe they're tired, they overdid something before the meeting, and they're scattered. you know so we have a lot of things to pay attention to as support group leaders. um and it's okay for us to ask for clarification if somebody says something and it strikes us as questionable. Asking them for um clarification. Let me switch this on here. So continuing on facilitation skills, you get to know your group. Do they struggle to get started? I tend to, just because I think it's my nature and I rather be over prepared than under prepared. I frequently have a back pocket topic that I'm ready to spring into should I need to. I would say that probably 90% of the time at this point, I don't need to. The conversations just start. Somebody has something on their mind and they start. That is always reassuring. They've made a connection with each other. And especially as people, and I'm sure you guys see this with your group, you have the folks who come regularly, and then you have the folks who come once in a while, and then you have the people who come and maybe you don't see them again for a long time, or maybe you don't ever see them again. And that's always, for me, I'm always a little concerned. Oh my gosh, so and so never came back to that meeting, I wonder why. And I will sometimes reach out to individuals, but honestly, I have so many people on my list of support group members that it's not really possible for me to do that on any regular basis. Um, uh, if people have a hard time getting started in the meeting, like you're opening it up and you just trying to figure out what nobody's saying much. One possibility is to ask them to share something that has happened to them recently that was a positive thing or a challenge, and just throw it out to the group. And not everybody will necessarily do that, but sometimes once one person talks, then another person springs on, and you can get a conversation going on. um um, I think it's important to encourage positivity, but not toxic positivity. Uh, a pity party or a gripe session is of limited value if that's all it is. So, inviting someone to go, hey, Karen just, expressed a really tough situation. Does anybody face something like that? What do you guys think? Any ideas on how she might be able? I'm picking on you, Karen, because you're the only person I can see. But that sort of that sort of interaction is, bring it to something so that people can learn and feel like they come away with something, not like, oh my God, I was so sad when I left there, all I wanted to do was cry. That doesn't help anyone. It's good to get those feelings out, but then it can be time for us to move on. And that's the key for leadership, to keep things moving. And as you come to know your members, you have an idea of who you can ask maybe a certain question, and it might lead the discussion perhaps in a more positive way or thought-provoking way. It doesn't always have to be sunshine and lollipops. We want thought behind it. So you know those are some important aspects, I think, of facilitating. You want to encourage participation from folks. And it is I think it's important. Not everybody, like I said, is going to have comfort in speaking. And um, they the folks who tend to be more quiet, whether that's part of their personality or it's part of their brain injury, they may have, if there are language issues, they may not be able to pull together the thought that they want to express. And it can be uh it can be helpful to say, so Mary, do you have something to say? It looked like you were, nodding your head a couple of times. What are your thoughts on this topic? Take your time. It's okay. And just sort of open that up for them. Um, and uh, you know, that's one way of doing it. Another way is to kind of put it on the table. There's 8 of us around this table, but I only hear 3 folks talking. I mean, what are you all? What are some of you who've been quiet? What's been on your mind? Are we off? Are we totally off target or what? And then see what happens. One of the things that can be challenging for me sometimes is having silence, but it's not a bad thing. And sometimes it might make it just uncomfortable enough for someone who doesn't always speak to say something, so keep that in mind as well. Now, I know one of the things, that a session like this can hopefully be helpful for is to identify some of the common issues that can come along and talk about some ways to address those. And one of the things that can be, especially uncomfortable perhaps for a leader is if there's conflict and arguing and fussing and oh my gosh, I've only had it one time happen in the group that I facilitated, and I was not very I hadn't been at it for very long when it happened, but 2 members got into a screaming match at each other, and then somebody threw their soda. Thankfully, it was in a paper cup as opposed to a can or something like that. Threw it at the other person, and that was probably the worst thing that ever happened in a group for me. And it can be, really tough. So first, just label it. Some of you look like you're getting upset. I kind of feel like the mood's changed in the room right now. What's happening? Sometimes that can be, a stimulate, can help people take a pause and a breath and maybe avoid a conflict. Or reframing what's happening. I give the example here. I know some of you are not able to see the presentation, so that's why I'm reading some of it. But we might say, something like, Joe, sounds like you felt put down because you disagreed with Mary. Am I reading you right? And then they get to verify whether you are reading them right. And not only for you as the leader, but also for the other members, because sometimes I find members want to come to the defense of another member, but the other person doesn't really need that. And so this helps to put it on the table. Referring back to the ground is important. Providing alternatives. If somebody does say that, yeah, Mary really put me down when I said something different, and that she didn't like, and I'm no, but and then taking it personally, so we can reflect it back to the group to say, well, everybody heard it, might have might what Mary said be maybe, reframed so that it doesn't feel so aggressive to someone, so and help the group to generate maybe what some alternatives could be. um it's uh I think it's important that we need to end the disruption. If they're going to get into an ongoing argument, then and I've never had to do this insofar as mute somebody because they were being, a conflict on an online meeting. But I have had to say, we're going to step out for a minute, when in an in-person meeting, and I'm just come with me. Let's take a breath, and help that person to calm down and just and I wouldn't make it a long break unless they really need that. And uh but rejoin the group, as soon as possible, and maybe help them to plan how to avoid this in the future. Um, and it can sometimes mean a follow-up discussion with, if there were two people or three people involved in this, after the group. So that way, again, you don't want it to follow them from meeting to meeting to meeting, or have people just say, oh, I'm not coming back to that group. Those are some ideas to take along. Another challenge that I know some people might have is people who take over the meeting. It's all of a sudden, the their show, and they're the ones talking and not giving people um um a chance to say something, or kind of talking over them, things like that. Excuse me. I'm not usually talking so much. um uh and not all groups have an agenda. I know I don't set a formal agenda for my groups unless we are having a speaker come in, really. But other groups may do that. Tonight's topic of discussion is grief, or tonight's topic of discussion is, sexuality, or whatever. Um, um, so so if that happens, where we're talking and all of a sudden somebody introduces a whole new topic, and then they're getting on, and going on, it might be something to call them on in a gentle way, like, hold on, we were just talking about grief, and how our roles have changed, and I don't think we were done yet. Let's put a pin in that and get back to what you're talking about, so we can, not to ignore it, but let's finish one topic before we jump on to the next one. Sometimes groups will kind of take a topic and beat it to death, and at that point, we can say, well, I think we've spent a lot of time on this, and I'm going to summarize the points that I hear, and then let's see if there's anything else we can talk about, um um and groups don't have to agree on everything, unless you are talking about specifically, um, some things in regards to the function and the formation of the group. Like, do we want to keep on, meeting about on the fourth Tuesday? Do we want to, keep on meeting at this time? Things like that. Um, we don't need a consensus on everything. We don't have to make a decision for how someone is going to handle a situation of their own. They're getting input, and then it's up to that person to decide what they're going to do with those opinions. So consensus is not needed unless it is for a group dysfunction, and or things that concern everybody. um, this was one question that had come up, in a discussion with a facilitator, and I threw this in here, um, just because I thought, okay, if one person feels it, maybe somebody else feels it. My group is getting angry at me. And uh, sometimes that's hard to decide. Are they getting angry at you, or are they getting angry at a situation that you are talking about? Um, and um, and it's hard sometimes to tell the difference. Um, so one thing is that if you have more than two people in a room, it's very likely you're going to have more than two opinions in the room. So there's that, and making sure that everyone's understood, um, not seeing yourself as the arbitrator of what is right or wrong, because we're not, and to value, the experience and the wisdom that's in the room. And it's to be neither defensive or trying to make this a popularity contest, are two important issues as well. So just some additional points to keep in mind. It is good to have an evaluation of the group. Now, like I said, we do at BIAV, we invite folks to fill out a survey, and they do it when they maybe feel particularly moved, or maybe if it's their first meeting. But there are other ways to evaluate your group, and looking at the logistics part of it, the supportive part of it, and what the group might like for to do. Do they want more speakers? Do they want less speakers? I know sometimes I've had stints where the group really just wanted to do social programs, and as I kind of stated earlier, social events are great as an adjunct for the meetings, but if it's every meeting, then folks aren't getting that chance to express themselves, and that's one of the main issues of a group. This slide comes from actually a page in the support group leader manual. I want to say, and I think I had wrote it down here someplace what page it was, but I don't see it now. But it's in the manual, and it's actually these are just the first 4 questions. It's a sheet with probably about 14, 15 questions on it. It can be having the group do that once a year, or maybe after the first 6 months if you're a new group and you're and you can do it in the meetings. You can also survey people. If you communicate with your group members by email, you can send this out to them and ask them to fill it out and return it to you. And then spend a session, or at least a part of a session, talking about what things we do well and what could stand for improvement. So like I said, this is one tool that you can use for your group. So now I'd like to these are some additional questions that come from that session as well. So these are like I said, that checklist has a lot of other questions available. So now we're getting to the interactive part. So I'd really like to, for those of you who are in a position to do this, is to unmute yourself and consider this question. There's like 3 questions, so I'd like to see if we can get through all of them. But the first one, I will read for those who are, you know, not able to see this for any reason. So the first meeting, and this is actually something that happened to me in my group not so long ago. A group member provides feedback to another group member, stating he's in a good situation with a support system and financial stability, and doesn't have the challenges resulting from his injury, as he's not as bad off. He's not as worse off as other members of the group. So he should take that into consideration speaking to the group. What would you do? How do you approach that? Don't everybody speak at once.
Yep, I can start. So, this is Karen. I would want to first off say that the changes post brain injury are, life-changing, and sure, levels of the different impacts vary, but comparing ourselves to each other isn't necessarily helpful. It's more, how do we support one another? So I wouldn't want this person to think that they aren't as worse off, or, that comparison. I think I would want to just sort of level it and say, glad you have all these great things, but I'm sure you have a lot of challenges too, and that's why you're here. Maybe something like.
Yeah. Others? Anybody else?
Christina, I don't actually think that's a bad thing, because I think that, as you said, it could be a good thing because everybody's situation is different. And so he could be saying that, that could be something positive for somebody else, him saying that he's not as worse off. Maybe that can give somebody some encouragement, thinking that, well, I'm bad off now. Maybe one day I can get to where he is. So maybe that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. This particular member was a little tiffed that he was asking questions and asking for support when he's had it so good that he's financially stable. He doesn't have results,
I see.
that sort of thing.
Got you. Okay, so I read it wrong.
Yeah. Well, maybe I didn't say it right either.
No, you probably said it right. I just heard it wrong, but you're okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a different situation.
But, a loss is a loss. And, and we all come from a different place. So if you had a good job before and you managed to save money, but now you don't have a job, and you're feeling, like I'm not contributing or something, that's a loss too.
Absolutely.
So that was certainly one of the things that I thought of with it. Anybody else have ideas or ways to maybe address that kind of issue?
I think I would just try to encourage them to remain open-minded and not be cautious of minimizing anybody's experience. Just like it was said before, everyone has a different experience. You don't know what another person is going through, and hearing from everyone can help us all think about different ways we can help ourselves. So just trying to encourage all the group members to think back to the group rules that we agreed upon. Let's be open, let's be respectful, and be cautious of minimizing anyone's experience.
Yeah, and usually our own problems sound and feel, and they're bigger to us than they are to other people, so because they're ours. And so that can certainly, play into it. And some days you just feel worse than others. Some days are hard and some days are, well, I see that a little bit more sunshine today. And if on one of those days they're having a hard time and they're talking about their situation, it's not, it doesn't have to, it's not a competition. Okay. Anybody else want to throw something in on that? Okay. How about this question? You have somebody who wants to bring up a topic of discussion and they ask a question, but you're not hearing anything. Nobody's contributing, nobody's saying anything. There's crickets. What might be something that might be able to do as a facilitator in a situation like that?
Yeah, this is a know your group thing where you mentioned earlier, kind of, if you've been doing it for a while, you know your group members. I actually had something like this happen. A new member came and asked something, and I knew a member who could help them, but she wasn't speaking up. Excuse me, she wasn't speaking up, and she's not shy. So I just said, I haven't personally had that experience, but I think, and I named the other member, I think you've had something similar. Is there anything you could share with the group in general about how you handled it? And she did. So it was almost like I just had to say, give her the baton, maybe,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I love it when my group is talking way more than I am, because then that I feel like it's a good thing. And sometimes, we give it a little bit of play and ask an additional question or something like that. And pointing out to someone, especially like, if know your group members, and that's a great idea, Karen. And sometimes maybe broadening the topic a little bit. If it was a very specific topic, it might be hard for people to realize, but it's like, how can I take this issue that they're bringing up and expand it so maybe it's more relatable to wider people? Any other ideas? I will say, sometimes they might ask a question that also hits very close to home for people, and folks might be reluctant to talk about it. Just like, oh, if I start talking about this, I'm going to cry, and I don't cry, or something like that. And and it might be something to be tabled, for another day or time.
Oh, Christine, there's
also-
actually
Oh.
a question, I'm sorry,
Oh,
in the
sure.
chat.
Mhm.
Do you have any recommendations for outbursts of crying? You were just mentioning that if you wanted to touch on that really quick.
Okay. Well, first of all, if someone's crying, there's the sniffle kind of crying and the tapping the ears, and then there's the bawling. And of course those things are different. But I think acknowledging that, God, did something really touch you on what we were just talking about? Did something really hit home? I wouldn't force the person to talk. If they are close by, I would, probably if it's in person, I might, try and reach out and tap them on the hand or something like that. Acknowledging the feelings, and then after, a little bit of time, I would let's move on. It sounds like, maybe so and so needs to get, kind of get their stuff together, and we don't have to be all staring at her. We've all been in this position before, kind of throwing in maybe a little bit of humor, that could help the person, and also just reassuring them, it's okay. Everybody here's probably cried at one point or another, if either in the meeting or like right after the meeting. So it's it giving them permission that it is okay, I think, is also valid. Thank you for bringing that up. And then I have this last one in regards to somebody as, group member is contacting you outside of the meeting frequently, complaining about other group members, making suggestions, criticize, or providing criticism like routinely, how might you address that? We hate to kind of turn down our members, I know when, the advantage that someone like me, who I'm running a support group through my work. So they have my work email and they have my work home number. I mean, they have my work number, but they don't have my home number. If you are a caregiver or a person with a brain injury who was leading a group, that's different. They're going to reach out to you in a maybe a lot more than you want to give them, because you're running the group, you're spending that time, but you can have other things that take up your time. Because I think one thing that can be done is to set limits. In the beginning, yeah, I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about this, but if they're bringing up, if they're complaining about group members, I tend to be more proactive about that. Everybody is dealing with their own issues, and everyone's injury has affected them. So Joe might interrupt a lot of times because he might just have a problem with controlling his impulses. That's part of a brain injury, or something like that, kind of putting it into that context. Um, uh, but it's kind of diminishing returns for them. I'll have this conversation with you once. The second time, if it's the same conversation, I'm not going to be as tolerant, because it's not productive. And then it becomes important to define those limits. We meet monthly. You can call me once a month in between if there's something that's really pressing on you, but you know, if you're having difficulty, for instance, especially complaining about other group members, maybe you need to reconsider whether this is the best group for you. And that's a really hard thing for me personally to say. But sometimes setting those limits are important. That's kind of the extreme, I think, insofar as saying, well, if you don't like it, leave. And of course, I'd say it a whole lot nicer than that. but you might want them to, put your concerns down on paper and look at them, and then go back to them again, having them to maybe increase their self-reflection on why are you feeling that way, and maybe they can just come to a better place of, you don't have to like everybody in the group, and that's a real thing. These, you can connect with the folks that you like, but you don't have to connect with everybody. So does anybody have a question that they'd like to bring up?
There's Megan provided some answers to that question in the chat. Maybe telling them this group isn't for them, perhaps recommend another group or alternate strategies to cope with feelings of frustration with others, providing some education surrounding their concerns or criticisms, setting a boundary for what topics are appropriate to bring to the attention of the facilitator and how often they do so.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Again.
Thank you.
I have a
So this-
question actually. Oh,
Uh-huh.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, how would you respond if a group member was, kind of encouraging other group members to use coping strategies that maybe are not considered like productive or healthy, but they say it works for them, or they say, you know, this is what helped me. Like maybe you should try this, but it's not something maybe that would be really recommended.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you navigate that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know, because, I had somebody in my group once talk about, just smoke some weed, it'll be fine. And it's like, and it was like, whoa, 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 yeah, it's not illegal in Virginia, but this is not a healthy coping mechanism, and, I think it's, what do people think about that suggestion? Bringing it out to the group, do you think that would be really healthy? Or, and I'm not saying that that's what, that individual might be saying, but I did have somebody say that and my mouth kind of fell open and I was like, what? Really? Um, um, but having folks discuss it, like, healthy responses are what the group is trying to encourage. So I think that, that can be a way of framing it. And do others feel like that is that suggestion was a healthy one? And kind of bring it up as a topic. Yeah. Does that answer
Yeah.
your question?
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. It's just trying to kind of walk the line between not minimizing someone's experience and what worked for them, but also not really supporting them, encouraging other people to do something if it wouldn't really be considered recommended by professionals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You don't want them to go and, start an argument with somebody and put themselves at risk, and I think, talking about, well, let's find the positive in what you're trying to do, but let's keep in mind the negatives, and then, which one's outweighing one versus the other, and so that may be another way of addressing it.
Yeah, I just don't want them to leave the group and think like, oh, well, I learned about that coping strategy from a support group at a hospital, so it must be a good one,
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah.
oh wait, no. Please don't do that.
No, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think, bringing out the negatives and the positives that, yes, you're trying to to handle it, but is this the healthiest way of handling it?
Yeah, and
And
maybe even reflect to the group. What other ways might you suggest? Yeah, I like
yeah,
that. That's a good strategy.
mm-hmm,
Thank you.
yeah, mm-hmm. So I just reminding folks of what we have available as far as resources. We do quarterly check-ins, and we do have the Mighty Network. We are BIAV. Sometimes how we do the support for support group leaders does change based on our arrangement with DARS, since they are a funder of ours. And so what their expectations are, but we also try to find out what your expectations are. What do you guys feel is helpful to help you with your groups? I mean, like I said, we have the Mighty Network, we have the check-ins, and then of course we do this once a year. Are there other ideas that you might have that would be helpful for you as group leaders that you would like, or are any of these things particularly helpful for you? Like, I don't go do Mighty Networks, but I really do like the meetings or something like that, or whatever. Any suggestions that you have would be welcome to hear. And you can drop me a line if that's easier. Okay. Well, oops, I didn't have I guess that was my last screen. I didn't have a goodbye, thank you screen, but there you go. I'm going to stop sharing now. And just, just open it up for you. Is there's anything else that you would have a question about before we wrap up? Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining. Oh, were you
Yeah.
saying something, Karen?
Yep, I don't have a question, but I was just gonna say one thing that was helpful. Stephanie Gormley, I see she dropped off. She does a stroke group at Riverside, which is right down the street from me. And then, I do a group, a caregiver group at the Denby House. We attended each other's, which was kind of nice because they're
Oh,
different,
that's
but there's things that we could, learn from each other, but also referring people to each other's groups. So maybe some
mhm.
cross, visiting either virtually each other's group might be something that might be
That's
helpful.
that's a great idea. That's wonderful. I know that I've had in my in-person group, I've had members, and they're not on this call right now. Members of the Richmond Aphasia group have come to my meetings, and I have attended their meetings. And yeah, I think that's wonderful. That's a great opportunity because not all of our groups are spread out across, and of course the ones that are online, are great. I will be passing that suggestion on. Um, I think most of you know I'm going to be leaving the IAV in a couple of weeks. I'm retiring. This gray hair has all been earned, and but the role will be filled. So I hope that. But if there's anything else I can do for you until the end of June, here I am. And there will be an evaluation sent out to you for this session and for each of the sessions that follow. And so tomorrow we meet, same place, same time, and we will have John Duggan, who was at our conference talking about mental health issues for folks with brain injury and for support group leaders, something for support group leaders to understand and yeah. So he's a very good speaker and he's very interactive. So I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, and let me know if there's anything that needs follow up from here. Okay.
Okay.
Thank